Have you ever wanted to live forever? Honestly, it sounds kind of stressful to me and not very fun, but the idea has enamored philosophers and scientists for thousands of years, and I guess still today, because here's an iceberg about immortality. This is interesting as hell, and the deep layers are really disturbing, like quantum immortality and other things like that, but you'll have to wait to get there. We're gonna start with the basic stuff and then get into the more disturbing stuff. But I promise it's fun the whole way through. Be sure to follow my Instagram, join my Discord, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel, and here we go. Layer 1, cryonics. Cryonics is basically the idea of freezing your body after death in the hope that future science can bring you back. Right now, companies like Alcor or the Cryonics Institute will put you in liquid nitrogen at negative 196 degrees Celsius, storing you indefinitely. The catch is that we have no proven way to thaw someone without destroying cells, and legally they can only freeze you after you're declared dead. It's less like freezing you alive and more like a last-ditch gamble that medicine will one day fix whatever killed you, plus reverse the freezing damage. It's controversial, but it's probably the most mainstream immortality industry that people can actually buy into today. Brian Johnson. Brian Johnson is the tech millionaire obsessed with reverse aging. He founded Kernel, which is brain interfaces, and runs the Blueprint Project, where he spends millions a year on anti-aging science. His daily life is basically regimented like a lab rat. Strict diets, supplements, constant medical monitoring, and even experimenting with plasma infusions from his teenage son, which is a little bit messed up. Johnson's whole thing isn't just about living longer, but trying to prove that humans can biologically reprogram aging. A lot of people mock him for it, but he's become the poster boy for Silicon Valley immortality obsession. Religion and afterlife concepts. Every major religion has its own angle on immortality. Christianity promises eternal life in heaven, Hinduism and Buddhism frame it through reincarnation, and Islam describes it as an everlasting afterlife with paradise and hell. For believers, it's not just philosophy, it's the most ancient immortality strategy. Your soul outliving your body. Across cultures, immortality myths often serve as moral systems too. Live a righteous life and you're rewarded with an eternal one. Even if you don't buy into religion, the persistence of afterlife stories shows how deeply humans are wired to really want to reject the finality of death. And honestly, in my opinion, I think that's why religion was even invented, was as a way for humans to cope with death, but that's neither here nor there. Fountain of Youth. This is the legendary spring that supposedly restores youth to anyone who drinks from it. Tales of it go back to Herodotus and Alexander the Great, but it's most famously tied to Spanish explorer Juan Ponce de Leon, who supposedly searched for it in Florida in the 1500s. Which, by the way, dude, you are not gonna find the Fountain of Youth in Florida. You might find the Fountain of Death. The myth itself is universal. Every culture seems to have a story about water that heals aging. Modern takes see it as a metaphor for humanity's obsession with reversing time, but it is also one of the earliest immortality products people believed could physically exist. Transhumanism. This is not about transgenderism, but trans rights. Transhumanism is the movement that says humans should use tech to push past biological limits. That can mean anything from gene editing to AI brain implants to uploading consciousness into machines. At its core, transhumanists see death as just another engineering problem to solve. While most mainstream science is still cautious, the philosophy has heavily influenced Silicon Valley billionaires, futurists, and biohackers who are actively funding life extension research. It's less fantasy than vampires or magic stones, but it raises a lot of ethical questions about what's left of humanity if you just keep replacing it with other stuff. Speaking of magic stones, Philosopher's Stone. Straight out of medieval alchemy, the Philosopher's Stone was said to be a substance capable of turning base metals into gold and granting eternal life. Alchemists like Nicholas Flamel became legendary for supposedly discovering it. The stone is basically the magical ancestor of modern chemistry and medicine. It symbolizes the pursuit of ultimate transformation. While no one's actually found it, the idea of a stone or formula that rewrites mortality still lingers others in pop culture, like from Harry Potter to conspiracy theories. Neuralink. This is Elon Musk's brain-computer interface project, aimed at treating neurological conditions and eventually syncing human brains with AI. In an immortality context, Neuralink is about mind uploading or at least creating backups of human consciousness. The idea is that if you can digitize thought, you can separate you from your fragile biological body. Critics argue that we're nowhere close to that level of understanding, but Neuralink keeps the sci-fi fantasy of digital immortality alive in the mainstream. Life extension supplements. Think resveratrol, NMN, spermidine, rapamycin, all the stuff that you'd find on longevity forums. These are chemicals that people take hoping to slow cellular aging. Some mimic the effects of calorie restriction. Others target pathways like mTOR or sirtuins that regulate growth and repair. There's no magical pill yet, but plenty of early studies suggest these compounds might extend lifespan in animals. For everyday people, this is the entry-level immortality hack, buying capsules that promise to hold off aging one day at a time. Biological immortality. In nature, some species appear to be biologically immortal. This one jellyfish that I'm not even going to try to pronounce the name of, but I'm sure my editor can put it on screen, can revert its cells back to an earlier stage and restart its life cycle indefinitely. Lobsters also show negligible senescence, meaning that they don't really age the way that we do, they just keep growing. This doesn't mean that they can't die, like disease or predators can still kill them, but it suggests that aging itself might not be an unbreakable rule of biology, so I guess Lord of the Rings was right about the elves. And scientists actually study these creatures for clues about how humans might also avoid cellular decline. Vampires. The vampire myth is one of the most enduring immortality fantasies. From Eastern European folklore to modern movies, vampires cheat death by feeding on others. The twist is that their immortality often comes with curses: sunlight, bloodlust, loneliness. Beyond fiction, vampires are a lot more like a reflection of a dark human wish, not just to live forever, but to sustain yourself by taking from others. So humans are fucked up. Legacy and memory. Not all immortality has to be literal. Philosophers argue that people achieve a kind of eternal life by the impact they leave behind, whether through art, children, discoveries, or memory. You might not exist physically, but your name, your work, or your influence continues beyond death. In a way, this is the most realistic and accessible immortality humans have achieved. Think of like Shakespeare, whose words are alive centuries later, or even like internet memes that outlast their creators. That was layer 1, I told you, pretty basic, but this iceberg is just getting started, let me tell ya. So yeah, so you're in for a ride. Let's get into layer 2. Caloric restriction. Caloric restriction is one of the only proven ways to extend lifespan in lab animals. By cutting daily calories by around 20 to 40% without malnutrition, mice, worms, and even monkeys show longer lives and fewer age-related diseases. The theory is that lower energy intake reduces metabolic stress and slows cellular damage. For humans, it's controversial. Some researchers argue it could work, while others warn the trade-off is constant hunger and reduced quality of life. It's less about starving yourself to death and more about tuning metabolism to stretch out the years. Digital immortality. This is the idea that your mind can live forever online. It ranges from creating an AI that mimics your personality to full-on consciousness uploading where your brain is scanned and transferred into a machine. Projects like mind clones or AI chatbots based on dead relatives are already popping up, but they're more like simulations than true continuance. The big question is, if a perfect copy of you exists digitally, is that you or just software wearing your face? Digital immortality shifts the problem of death into the problem of identity. Immortality bus. The Immortality bus was a publicity stunt by transhumanist activist Zoltan Istvan during his 2016 US presidential campaign. He drove a 40-foot bus shaped like a giant coffin across America to promote life extension technology and to raise awareness about anti-aging science. The coffin bus was meant as satire and shock value. It symbolized the urgency of tackling death itself. And even though it was pretty tongue-in-cheek, it became a weirdly iconic piece of the modern immortality movement. movement. And I don't know, he sounds crazy as fuck, but honestly, he did this thing during his 2016 US presidential campaign. We might have been better off, I don't know. Telomerase activation. Telomeres are the little caps at the end of your chromosomes that shorten each time a cell divides. When they get too short, the cell can't divide anymore, which is tied to aging. Telomerase is the enzyme that rebuilds those caps. Normally, it's switched off in adult cells, but if you turn it back on, cells can theoretically keep dividing. The downside is that many cancers also hijack telomerase to grow endlessly, so it's a razor's edge. Activate it to stay youthful, but risk unleashing uncontrolled growth. Parabiosis. Parabiosis is the creepy-sounding practice of surgically connecting two organisms to share blood circulation. In modern research, it's been tested by linking old and young mice. The older mouse shows improved muscle, brain, and liver function after receiving young blood, while the younger mouse declines faster. Some startups have even explored transfusions of young plasma into older humans, though clinical evidence is still thin. The whole concept toes the line between groundbreaking science and literal vampiric horror. Genetic engineering. This is about rewriting the code of life itself. With CRISPR and other gene editing tools, scientists can theoretically fix mutations that cause aging-related diseases or even program cells to resist damage altogether. Some experiments involve tweaking longevity genes like FOXO3 or altering DNA repair pathways. The challenge is complexity. Aging is not caused by one gene, but an orchestra of processes. Genetic engineering as an immortality route means trying to rewrite the entire symphony without breaking it, so it's pretty difficult. Epigenetic clocks. Epigenetic clocks measure biological rate by looking at chemical markers on DNA called methyl groups. Unlike your chronological age, biological age shows how old your body really is on a cellular level. Scientists use these clocks to test whether certain interventions actually slow or reverse aging. It's not just about living long, but measuring whether you're staying younger inside. The breakthrough here is that aging is being quantified like a stopwatch, making it a lot easier to actually see what works and what doesn't. Senolytics. As we age, damaged cells that should die sometimes refuse to, turning into senescent cells. These cells don't function properly, but still release toxic signals that damage surrounding tissue, accelerating aging. Senolytics are drugs designed to hunt down and clear out these zombie cells. In mice, senolytics have extended lifespan and improved organ health. For humans, clinical trials are still ongoing. It's less about making you immortal and more about cleaning house so your body runs longer without breakdown. Biostasis. Biostasis is a step beyond cryonics. It's about putting living systems into a kind of paused state. Instead of freezing after death, researchers try to slow biological processes in real time, giving doctors more time during surgery or trauma. This could mean using cold temperatures, chemicals, or metabolic tricks to suspend biological activity. Think of it like hitting a pause on life, then resuming later. It's not immortality by itself, but it's a piece of the puzzle for buying extra time. Immortality in mythology. From Greek gods to Chinese Taoist immortals, mythology is packed with figures who live forever. In Greece, the gods granted humans ambrosia, but those who drank it often paid a price. In Mesopotamia's Epic of Gilgamesh, the hero fails to gain eternal life, showing how elusive immortality is. Chinese alchemists searched for elixirs of immortality, while Hindu texts describe Amrita, the nectar of the gods. So a lot of mythology frames immortality as both a divine gift and a dangerous temptation, and it's pretty much always just out of reach. Blue zones. Blue zones are regions of the world where people live significantly longer than average. Examples include Okinawa, Japan, Sardinia in Italy, and Nicosia in Costa Rica. These communities don't rely on tech or supplements. They follow traditional diets, they maintain strong social bonds, and they live active, low-stress lifestyles. Instead of beating death, blue zones show how natural longevity is possible through culture and habits. And that was layer 2, and I hope you're enjoying so far, guys. Make sure you have some water, stay hydrated, or else you might not be immortal. To live longer, get some water. And let's jump into layer 3. Biogerontology. Biogerontology is the actual scientific field dedicated to aging and how to slow it. Instead of just looking at diseases like cancer or Alzheimer's, biogerontologists ask, why do we age at all? They look at things like DNA damage, telomere shortening, mitochondrial decline, and loss of protein stability. It's not about making people live forever overnight, but about treating aging itself as the root cause of most diseases. And that's a pretty nice, huge philosophical shift, because for most of history, medicine just tried to treat the end result. In labs today, biogerontology is what drives a lot of the interventions we've already talked about, from senolytics to epigenetic clocks. It's basically the umbrella field behind the entire Immortality project. Methuselah Foundation, named after the biblical figure said to have lived 969 years. The Methuselah Foundation is a non-profit focused on extending healthy human life. They've been around since 2003 and are known for offering the Methuselah Mouse Prize, which rewarded researchers who could make mice live significantly longer. This got a lot of scientists engaged in aging research back when it wasn't taken seriously. They've also funded tissue engineering, like 3D printed organs, with the idea that replacing failing parts could extend life. Their slogan is literally making 90 the new 50, which tells you exactly how they frame immortality. Not as gods walking the earth forever, but as humans living much longer and healthier lives. SENS, or S-E-N-S. SENS stands for Strategies for Engineered Negligible Senescence, and it's the brainchild of biologist Aubrey de Grey. His idea is that aging is basically a buildup of different types of cellular and molecular damage, and each type can be fixed with engineering. He mapped it out into categories like cell loss, mitochondrial mutations, and extracellular junk, then proposed scientific fixes for each one. For example, gene therapies for mutations or enzymes to clean up toxic byproducts. De Grey's theory is kind of controversial. Some scientists think it's overly optimistic, but it gave structure to the idea that aging could be reversed systematically. SENS is one of the reasons that aging research got mainstream attention in the 2000s instead of being dismissed as science fiction. Fasting and autophagy. Autophagy literally means self-eating, and it's a process where your body breaks down and recycles old or damaged cell components. And fasting is one of the main triggers for autophagy. When your body runs low on external fuel, it starts cleaning house internally, chewing up dysfunctional proteins and organelles. This is why intermittent fasting and also long-term fasting became so trendy. They're not just about losing weight, although it helps with that a lot, but also about cellular spring cleaning. In mice and other animals, fasting boosts lifespan by reducing disease and improving metabolic health. For humans, the science is newer, but the idea that skipping meals makes you live longer has deep cultural roots. Most religions already built fasting into their traditions long before autophagy was actually, scientifically discovered. Qin Shi Huang's elixir. China's first emperor, Qin Shi Huang, was obsessed with immortality. Historical records say he sent expeditions across the empire looking for the elixir of life. Ironically, the elixirs he ended up taking were made with mercury and other toxic substances. Some historians believe his early death at 49 was actually caused by his own immortality potions. And this is just another haunting example of showing humans' desperation for eternal life. The most powerful man in the world at this time still couldn't stop himself from poisoning his body in that pursuit. His tomb, still sealed today, is rumored to contain rivers of mercury, which is a pretty grim echo of his quest for eternal life. The Wandering Jew. This is a medieval Christian legend about a man who supposedly mocked Jesus on the way to the crucifixion and was cursed to wander the earth until the second coming. Over time, the figure became a symbol of eternal life as punishment rather than blessing. Instead of living forever in glory, the wandering Jew is doomed to drift endlessly, unable to die, unable to find a peace. The story spread across Europe, shifting details depending on the culture, but always hammering home the same warning. Immortality might not be a gift, it might be a curse. Epigenetic reprogramming. This is one of the wildest frontiers in aging research right now. The idea is that even if your cells accumulate damage and age, You can reset them to a more youthful state by tweaking their epigenetic programming, the chemical markers that control which genes are switched on or off. Researchers discovered that certain factors can revert adult cells back into stem cells. If you apply them partially, you don't erase the cell's identity, but you roll back its age markers. In animal tests, this has restored vision in old mice and rejuvenated organs. It's not immortality yet, but it hints at something close to biological time travel, like telling your cells, hey, you're 20 again, act like it. 9 hallmarks of aging. This is like the official cheat sheet for why bodies grow old. Scientists boiled aging down into 9 biological processes, including things like genomic instability, telomere shortening, mitochondrial dysfunction, and stem cell exhaustion. Think of it like 9 ways your car can break down. If you fix the engine, the brakes might still wear out. Each hallmark is a target for anti-aging research, senolytics, telomerase, epigenetic reprogramming, and so on. The importance of this framework is that it gave researchers a common language. Instead of talking vaguely about aging, they could point to specific measurable problems. Shangri-La. Shangri-La is the mystical hidden valley from James Hilton's 1933 novel Lost Horizon. In the book, it's a remote paradise in the Himalayas where people age extremely slow and live for centuries in peace. Over time, Shangri-La became shorthand for any utopian place where longevity or eternal youth is possible. Unlike religious heavens or magical fountains, it's framed as a secret earthly location, a mystical pocket where immortality naturally exists. The idea captured Western imaginations during the 20th century and fed into real-life obsessions with Tibet and Eastern spirituality. Xenotransplantation. This is the practice of transplanting organs or tissues from one species into another. Most often, it means using genetically modified pigs to grow organs for humans. And the immortality tie-in here is pretty obvious. If you can swap out failing human parts for fresh replacements indefinitely, you can extend life far beyond the natural limit. We're not there yet, fully. Rejection and tissue transmission are major risks, but there have already been experimental cases where pig hearts and kidneys functioned in humans for a time. If perfected, xenotransplants can make the idea of running out of spare parts, symbolically at least, obsolete. Blood plasma dilution. This is separate from parabiosis and way less horror movie. Instead of giving old people young blood, researchers have found that simply diluting old plasma with a saline albumin solution can rejuvenate tissues in mice. The logic is that aging plasma has a buildup of harmful proteins, so thinning it out resets the system. Early human trials suggest that it might improve health markers, but it's still experimental. It flips the script. Immortality science isn't always about adding something new, sometimes it's about flushing out the garbage that your body just accumulates over decades. Immortal cell line. The most famous is the HeLa cells, taken without consent from Henrietta Lacks in 1951. These cells are essentially immortal in the lab, they just keep dividing forever under the right conditions. HeLa cells have been crucial to medical breakthroughs like the polio vaccine and cancer research. And for immortality discussions, they raise big questions. If cells can live forever outside the body, what's stopping us from replicating that stability inside humans? On the flip side, immortal cells are also how cancers behave, which shows there's a thin line between living forever, again, and uncontrolled growth, just like we were talking with the telomerase stuff. Deathless Gilgamesh. The Epic of Gilgamesh is the oldest known story about the quest for immortality. Gilgamesh, the king of Uruk, sets out to find eternal life after his friend Enkidu dies. He learns of a plant that can restore youth, but in the end, a snake steals it from him. The lesson is clear. Immortality is for the gods, not for humans. What is powerful is how ancient this obsession is. 4,000 years ago, people were already writing epics about death and the desperate wish to escape it. Nootropics and cognitive longevity. Nootropics are drugs and supplements meant to enhance brain function. Things like modafinil, racetams, or even microdosing psychedelics. While they're usually pitched as focus or productivity boosters, there's also a longevity angle. The idea is that what's the point of living forever if your mind decays? Cognitive decline is one of the biggest barriers to meaningful immortality. People taking nootropics are essentially beta testing strategies for keeping the brain sharp into old age. Whether it's boosting memory, protecting neurons, or slowing dementia, it's about making sure immortality isn't just a body that lasts, but a mind that keeps up. And that was layer 3! Make sure you're eating some food, good food so you stay living for a long time, you know? And some water, because you need water to live for a long time, so following the theme of this video, make sure that you are well fed. You got a snack, you know, get, cozy and shit, wherever you are, man. Hope you're man or woman or non-binary person, you know? Whoever you are, hope you're having a good day. And let's get into layer 4, let's do it! Pope Innocent VIII. Pope Innocent VIII, who reigned in the late 1400s, is sometimes brought up in lore of, like, immortality because of rumors that he received transfusions of blood from young boys on his deathbed. Yeah, I'm sure it was just blood he got transfused from them. Mr. Pope Innocent. According to some accounts, 3 boys were bled to death in the attempt to save him, though historians debate how much of the story is exaggerated or how much of it is anti-Catholic propaganda. Elizabeth Bathory. Known as the Blood Countess, Elizabeth Bathory was a Hungarian noblewoman accused of murdering hundreds of girls in the early 1600s. Legend says she bathed in their blood to preserve her youth and beauty, and while historians believe that the actual body count was likely inflated by her enemies, the blood bathing myth made her a pretty, iconic gothic figure of immortality obsession. And she's often compared to Dracula, and in a way her story reflects a pretty real cultural fear that the powerful might literally consume the young to cling to life. Taoist principles. In Taoist tradition, immortality isn't just about living forever physically, it's tied to spiritual harmony. Taoist alchemists searched for elixirs and practiced inner cultivation techniques, like breathing exercises, meditation, and qigong to achieve longevity or transcendence. Some sought physical immortality while others framed it as unity with the Tao, where death itself is transcended. The fascinating part is how holistic it is. Diet, herbs, martial arts, and philosophy were all blended together in pursuit of extending life. Unlike Western myths, Taoist immortality was less about cheating death and more about aligning with nature until death lost its grip. Ambrosia and Amrita. Ambrosia in Greek mythology and Amrita in Hindu mythology are both divine substances granting immortality to gods. Ambrosia was said to be the food or drink of the Olympians, while Amrita came from the churning of the cosmic ocean in Hindu texts. Both represent a nectar that separates mortals from immortals. What's interesting is how 2 totally different cultures came up with the same concept, a sacred drink that grants eternal life. Li Qingyin. Li Qingyin is a legendary Chinese herbalist rumored to have lived over 200 years, with some claims stretching as far as 256. He supposedly credited his longevity to a diet of herbs like goji berries, wild ginseng, and a calm lifestyle. While it's impossible to verify these claims, his story has become a cultural touchstone for the idea that natural living and herbal remedies could grant extreme lifespan. Calico. This is not referring to the cat breed, although calicos are my favorite. Calico is the Google-funded biotech company that was launched back in 2013 with a huge mission: defeat aging itself. They pulled in some of the top names in biology, and people thought this was going to be the project that cracked the code of living longer. For years, the press framed it as Google is trying to cure death. But when people checked in on them later, it looked more like a black box. They're extremely secretive, don't publish much, and most of the actual work seems to be basic research into how aging even works on a cellular level. The hype cooled off once it became obvious they weren't going to make like a pill or treatment that fixed death. And Calico started to feel like another example of how even with billions of dollars, this problem doesn't give up its secrets easily. Iden's apples. In Norse mythology, the gods don't stay young automatically. They depend on Iden, a goddess who keeps these golden apples that they have to eat to stay youthful. When she's kidnapped in one story, the gods begin to age rapidly and basically fall apart without her. It shows how even the immortals in that culture weren't naturally untouchable. They had a supply they were dependent on. Aiden's apples weren't like a one-time fix either. They had to keep eating them. It's an odd detail because it makes their immortality fragile. Like if one goddess or one basket of fruit goes missing, the entire system collapses. Tithonus syndrome. In Greek myth, the goddess Eos fell in love with a mortal man, Tithonus, and begged Zeus to make him immortal. He granted the wish, but she forgot to ask for eternal youth, so Tithonus just kept aging. His body decayed forever, shrinking and shriveling, but he never actually died. Eventually, he became this pathetic figure. Some versions say he turned into a cicada. The term Tithonus syndrome now gets used in aging research and philosophy to describe the nightmare scenario of life extension, living way past your natural limit but trapped in a body that keeps falling apart, where the years pile on endlessly with no relief. Mahavatar Babaji. Mahavatar Babaji is this semi-mythical yogi figure in Indian spiritual traditions, especially popularized in Autobiography of a Yogi. By the way, guys, I'm so sorry if I'm mispronouncing this. I apologize. He's described as having lived for centuries in the Himalayas, teaching disciples and appearing in visions, but never aging. Followers say he still exists in a perfected body, hidden from the world. There's no historical proof, it's more of a spiritual archetype. The eternal master who transcended death through meditation and higher states of consciousness. And for believers, Babaji still isn't dead or gone, he's just continuing on in secret. Immortality rings. Throughout different traditions, there are stories about rings that grant eternal life. Sometimes it's literally a magical ring that stops the wearer from aging or dying, like in folklore or fantasy. Other times, it's more cursed, like Tolkien's One Ring, which extends life but corrupts the user. There are also alchemical and occult texts that talk about crafted talismans or rings engraved with symbols that supposedly channel energy to prolong life. Rings show up because they're small, wearable, intimate, and it makes them the perfect vessel for imagined immortality. Also, Lord of the Rings is like goated as fuck, and if you don't think so, you're stupid. Longevity escape velocity. This is a term used in life extension circles to describe a tipping point. If science can slow or reverse aging faster than the years you're living through, you can basically outpace death. Like, if every decade you live, medicine advances enough to give you another 15 or 20 years, you never actually hit the wall. It's not about becoming immortal instantly, it's about stringing together enough breakthroughs in a row that you effectively never run out of time. Futurists like Aubrey de Grey push this idea hard, arguing that once humanity reaches escape velocity, everyone alive at that point could live indefinitely. Reverse age in dogs. There have been legit studies where scientists try to roll back the biological age of dogs. Companies like Loyal are running clinical trials to extend dog lifespan with anti-aging drugs, and researchers have experimented with epigenetic reprogramming to make older dogs biologically younger. Dogs are a common testing ground because their lifespans are short, so you can measure changes faster than in humans. If you can make a 10-year-old dog behave like a 5-year-old again, that's a big step in proving that aging can be dialed backward. Salamanders. Salamanders aren't immortal, but they're famous for their insane regenerative abilities. They can regrow entire limbs, tails, spinal cords, or even parts of their hearts and brains. Scientists study them to understand how regeneration works, because if humans could copy that, it would be a massive breakthrough for longevity. Some species also show resistance to aging effects in certain tissues. They represent a natural model of extreme repair and recovery that people hope can be translated into human medicine. Monkey testicles. Dude, I gotta say, guys, I have been doing this YouTube thing for about 2 or 3 years now, and I have waited 2 or 3 years for an opportunity to say monkey testicles in a video. And it's finally here. I could quit today and I'd be happy, bro. In the early 20th century, a surgeon named Serge Voronov got famous for grafting slices of monkey testicles onto human men, claiming it would restore youth and vitality. Wealthy clients lined up believing it was the secret to immortality. It was basically pseudoscience, but at the time it rode the hype around hormones and rejuvenation. The idea was that animal glands held some kind of life force that could be transplanted. It ended up discredited, but it's a pretty interesting chapter in the history of people doing anything to not age. Leonard Jones. Leonard Jones was an American eccentric in the 1800s who believed immortality could be achieved through political reform and moral living. He ran for president multiple times on a platform of immortalist beliefs, claiming that if enough people were virtuous enough, they wouldn't die. He thought death was basically a product of corruption and bad governance. His campaigns never went anywhere, but he became a weird historical footnote as one of the few people to literally base his politics on the promise of eternal life. Count of Saint Germain. The Count of Saint Germain was an 18th century European figure who showed up in royal courts across the continent, claiming to have secret knowledge of alchemy and medicine. He was a composer, a painter, and he spoke multiple languages, but what really made him legendary were rumors that he never aged. Some claimed to have seen him looking the same decades apart, with stories saying he was hundreds of years old. He supposedly died in 1784, but sightings of him kept popping up afterward, fueling the idea that he actually cracked immortality. And that was Layer 4, guys. Who's hyped for Layer 5? That's halfway. We're halfway, guys. Let's get into it. Russian Cosmism. Russian Cosmism was a philosophical and spiritual movement from the late 1800s into the Soviet era that combined science, mysticism, and a belief in human immortality. Thinkers like Nikolai Fedorov argued that death was humanity's greatest injustice, and science had a moral duty to conquer it. They imagined resurrecting all ancestors using future technology, colonizing space, and living forever as a cosmic species. What's strange is that this wasn't fringe. It influenced real Soviet science, space exploration, and even early transhumanist ideas. In their view, immortality wasn't just personal, it was collective. Everyone who ever lived could be brought back, and that was their focus. Breathing method. There are schools of thought claiming that controlled breathing alone can extend life, sometimes indefinitely. Certain yogic practices teach that each person is given a set number of breaths for their lifetime. So if you slow your breathing through meditation and exercises, you stretch that lifespan. Beyond myth, there are modern offshoots like pranayama, qigong, and even Western breathwork movements, all of which frame oxygen control as a path to longevity. Some practitioners take it to the extreme, suggesting that by mastering breath, the body can survive on less food or energy altogether. Solar breatharians. Breatharians are people who claim they don't need food or sometimes even water, surviving only on prana or life energy. Solar breatharians specifically believe they can live indefinitely by doing photosynthesis, basically. They think they can absorb energy from the sunlight. They often practice staring at the sun at dawn or dusk, believing that it recharges them the way solar panels work. There are documented cases of people dying trying to follow this lifestyle, but the belief still circulates, especially in New Age circles. Well of Zamzam. The Well of Zamzam is a sacred spring in Mecca, tied to the Islamic story of Hagar and her son Ishmael. According to tradition, the well was created by divine intervention, and the water is considered blessed with special healing and sustaining properties. Pilgrims still drink it during Hajj, and stories describe how Zamzam water never runs dry despite millions drawing from it. In immortality lore, it's one of the many sacred waters tied to vitality and divine favor, with some believers treating it as an earthly source of miraculous longevity. Talos and Lemuria. Talos is a mythical underground city said to be located beneath Mount Shasta in California, tied to the lost continent of Lemuria. In modern esoteric lore, the Lemurians were an ancient, highly advanced race who supposedly discovered the secret of physical immortality and retreated underground to preserve themselves. New Age groups claim that they still exist there, living in perfect health for hundreds of years, occasionally revealing themselves to chosen people. Raelian cloning. The Raelian movement, a UFO religion founded in the 1970s, teaches that humanity was created by aliens through genetic engineering. One of their major pushes in the early 2000s was cloning as the pathway to immortality. They announced that their biotech company, Clonaid, had successfully cloned a human baby named Eve in 2002, though no evidence was ever produced. The Raelians argued that cloning combined with memory transfer would allow eternal life. Once a body wears out, you just grow a new one and upload yourself into it. But this was obviously, I mean, if you believe it, man, fuck, go for it. Soma. In Vedic texts, Soma was both a god and a ritual drink, described as giving strength, inspiration, and in some hymns, immortality. The exact identity of Soma is unknown. Some scholars think it was a hallucinogenic plant. Others argue it was a mix of herbs or even mushrooms. Whatever it was considered sacred fuel for both gods and humans, a substance that could elevate mortals into something closer to the divine. Now again, the word Vedic refers to the Vedas, which are the oldest sacred texts of India, written in Sanskrit thousands of years ago. They are hymns, rituals, and philosophical writings that laid the foundation for Hinduism and influenced Buddhism and Jainism too. Within these texts, Soma shows up constantly. And again, I think I mentioned this earlier a little bit, but drinking it is said to give strength to warriors, inspiration to poets, and immortality. Mithras cult. The cult of Mithras was a mystery religion in the Roman Empire around the 1st to 4th century CE. It centered on the god Mithras, often shown slaying a sacred bull, and it was practiced mainly by soldiers. Because it was a mystery religion, the rituals were secret. Initiates went through stages of initiation, underground temples, and symbolic meals. Little writing from the cult survives, so most of what we know comes from archaeology and outside references. In immortality terms, Mithraic belief was tied to cosmic struggle and the soul's journey after life. Initiates sought spiritual rebirth and eternal life through their rites, which were framed as transcendence beyond the mortal body. Even though later Christianity eclipsed it, Mithraism was one of the strongest competitors in the Roman world for offering people a path to life after death. Remote viewing afterlife. Remote viewing is a term that blew up during the Cold War, when the US military and CIA funded psychic spying experiments under programs like Stargate. Supposedly, people could sit in a room and describe hidden targets thousands of miles away using extrasensory perception. The immortality angle here comes in when believers extend remote viewing beyond space into time and other realms. Some claim trained viewers can perceive the afterlife or consciousness beyond death. In New Age circles, remote viewing became part of the toolkit for exploring immortality, not as physical longevity, but as evidence that the mind survives outside the body and can travel beyond it. Soma-fera. Soma-fera is a term used in modern pagan and occult communities, combining soma, which means body, and fera, which means wild beast. It refers to a set of ecstatic or altered states where people claim they can push their bodies into supernatural levels of strength, healing, or even transformation. Practitioners describe it as harnessing a primal energy through rituals, trance, or meditation. The immortality part here is the idea that by shifting into this heightened state, the body regenerates faster or resists normal decay. It pulls partly from Norse berserker legends, partly from yogic energy traditions, but in practice it's a modern and mystical attempt to rewrite the body's limits. Eternal consciousness field. This is more of a metaphysical concept than a specific group. In certain New Age and fringe physics writings, consciousness is described as a universal field, something fundamental to reality, like gravity or electromagnetism. Claim is that individual minds don't vanish after death. They return to or remain connected with this field. Immortality here isn't about bodies or even personality, but about awareness itself being eternal. It pulls from both Eastern philosophy, like Brahmin and Hindu thought, and Western attempts to merge quantum mechanics with spirituality. People who believe in this often see immortality not as a goal, but kind of a built-in truth that's always been there. Aghori practices. The Aghori are a small sect of Hindu ascetics in India, known for their extreme and taboo-breaking rituals. They meditate in cremation grounds, smear themselves with the ashes of the dead, and sometimes use skulls in their practices. Their philosophy is rooted in the idea that everything, even death and decay, is sacred and part of ultimate reality. For the Aghori, confronting death directly is a way to transcend fear of it and dissolve the boundaries between life and death. Some stories describe Aghori saints with supernatural longevity or powers, seen as evidence that their practices connect them to immortality on a spiritual level. It's kind of disturbing, but I mean, it's their culture, so. Secret societies and immortality rites. Throughout history, secret societies have been tied to rumors of hidden immortality rituals. Groups like the Freemasons, Rosicrucians, and later occult orders often had ceremonies involving death and rebirth symbolism, promising initiate spiritual transformation. Some writings describe secret elixirs, hidden knowledge of alchemy, or rituals that supposedly extended life. The secrecy itself amplified the myths. If outsiders weren't allowed in, it was easy to imagine immortality being guarded in the inner circles. Whether or not anyone actually achieved longer lives, these societies fed that idea, And that was Layer 5. Time for Layer 6, guys. Here we go. Carbon-14 brain mapping. Carbon-14 brain mapping comes from a quirky overlap of nuclear history and neuroscience. Atmospheric nuclear bomb tests in the 1950s and 60s released a huge spike of carbon-14 into the air. Plants absorbed it, animals ate the plants, and it ended up inside us. Because neurons stop dividing after birth, the level of carbon-14 in a neuron's DNA is basically a timestamp for when it was born. Swedish researchers used this to map the birth date of human brain cells and discovered that, contrary to long-held beliefs, some brain regions do generate new neurons in adulthood. It's not an immortality therapy, but it's one of the only direct ways that scientists have been able to see which parts of the brain are renewing and which parts aren't. Russian brain preservation. CryoRus is a cryonics company based near Moscow that has been operating since the early 2000s. Unlike some American outfits, CryoRus offers cheaper contracts and markets itself to both domestic and international clients. They store whole bodies and also just heads or brains, the idea being that future technology may only need the preserved brain to reconstruct a person. Customers sign legal agreements ahead of time, and once they're declared dead, technicians begin rapid cooling and storage in liquid nitrogen. The facility has drawn attention for its Spartan conditions, metal tanks in a warehouse rather than futuristic labs, but it represents Russia's entry into the global cryonics scene. Their focus is often framed more bluntly around the brain as the seat of the self, with less emphasis on the whole rich person lifestyle marketing. It overlaps with Layer 1's cryonics we already talked about, but their Russian operation is specific for being one of the only non-US options, and for its emphasis on brain-only preservation. Project Gilgamesh. Project Gilgamesh is rumored to have been a US defense research program in the 1990s and early 2000s. Its supposed aim was extending the lifespans of soldiers and increasing performance using biotechnology. The program's name comes directly from the king Gilgamesh we talked about earlier, whose epic is the first recorded story about searching for immortality. Leaked presentations and scattered online references describe work in genetic engineering, regenerative medicine, and experiments with long-lived animal species. The evidence for it being real is thin, unlike declassified programs such as Stargate, but the idea of a classified immortality project caught traction in conspiracy circles. The suggestion is that militaries wouldn't just want weapons, they would want soldiers who don't age, don't break down, and can fight longer than any natural human. Temporal resurrection. Temporal resurrection is a French theory that comes out of speculative physics discussions. The idea is that if the universe is fundamentally made of information, then every state that ever existed is still encoded somewhere. Instead of moving someone through time, a future technology could reconstruct their exact state at a past moment, effectively rewinding them into existence. Unlike cloning or re-uploading, this isn't a copy, it would be a restoration of the original self as they were. The proposal combines interpretations of quantum information theory with metaphysical ideas about persistence of identity. It's not a mainstream scientific pursuit, but it shows up in obscure forums and discussions where immortality is framed less as biology and more as manipulating space-time itself. Corpse medicine. For several centuries in Europe, remedies made from human remains were sold and prescribed as legitimate medicine. Apothecaries ground up Egyptian mummies for powders, distilled human fat into ointments, and prepared tinctures from blood or bone. These treatments were used by both peasants and nobility, with kings and queens recorded as taking them. They were believed to carry vital force that could cure disease and restore strength. The practice peaked in the 16th and 17th centuries, overlapping with the rise of modern early science. It eventually declined as medicine professionalized, but it remained in some pharmacopoeias into the 18th century. Walt Disney. The claim that Walt Disney had himself frozen after death is one of the most enduring urban legends of the 20th century. In reality, Disney died in December 1966 and was cremated shortly after at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, California. The cryonics rumor appeared within a year or two, likely fueled by the fact that cryonics was just becoming a popular topic and Disney was so closely associated with futurism through projects like Epcot and Tomorrowland. By the 1970s, tabloid stories cemented the myth, often placing his frozen body beneath Disneyland. No evidence supports it, but the rumor became a cultural shorthand, the image of a visionary who literally tried to outwit death and wait for the science to catch up. Black goo theory. Black goo theory emerged from conspiracy communities blending nanotechnology fears, alien myths, and environmental anxieties. The core claim is that a viscous, tar-like substance exists that is alive or semi-alive, capable of infecting organisms, rewriting DNA, and merging with human hosts. Ever heard of venom? Stories tie it to supposed samples recovered from meteors, Antarctic expeditions, or secret labs. In this narrative, the goo acts like a parasite and a symbiote at once, dissolving the boundary between the human and the other. References to black goo appear in UFOlogy, online forums, and of course, comics and stuff like that. But of course, there's no scientific validation, bro. That was Layer 6, guys. Let's get into Layer 7. Immortality virus. The immortality virus shows up in two places: biotech speculation and online conspiracy stories. In biotech, researchers have played with viral vectors, basically viruses stripped of their harmful parts, to deliver genes that might extend lifespan, like telomerase activation or enhanced DNA repair. Lab animals have had their lifespans extended with gene therapy this way. In conspiracy spaces, the term gets flipped into a darker idea. A secret virus already exists that can make humans stop aging, held back by governments or elites. In the lab reality, this is an extension of normal gene therapy. Use an engineered virus to insert beneficial genes into a host, not a science fiction pathogen that makes you immortal overnight. Anti-entropy rituals. This is a term you find in occult and fringe science circles. In physics, entropy is the name for the tendency toward disorder, basically why everything breaks down. Some magical or ritual systems claim you can symbolically or energetically reverse entropy, stopping decay in the body, objects, or environments. Practices range from chanting and sigil work to complex energy inversions during astronomical alignments. It's not mainstream religion, it's more the kind of thing passed around in esoteric forums or self-published grimoires. These rituals don't have a unified lineage like Taoist or Vedic practices. They're usually mashups of physics language and ceremonial magic invented by individuals or small groups. Practitioners claim they can slow aging, stop metal from rusting, or keep food from spoiling as a demonstration. There's no evidence of actual entropy reversal, but the idea keeps resurfacing because it borrows the most fundamental law of science and frames it as something a human can defy, which is just bullshit. Nectome. Nectome is a real company founded in 2016 by MIT researchers Robert McIntyre and Michael McKenna. Their pitch was 100% fatal brain preservation. Euthanize a terminally ill person under anesthesia while pumping in a chemical fixture that preserves the brain's ultrastructure perfectly at the nanometer level. The idea is that the preserved brain could one day be scanned in detail and uploaded into a computer, effectively making a digital copy of the person. They even got into Y Combinator and won a government prize for brain preservation. Hyperstition immortality. Hyperstition is a term from 90s cyberculture and theory circles, especially the CCRU, Cybernetic Culture Research Unit at Warwick. It describes ideas or fictions that make themselves real by being believed and acted upon. Hyperstition immortality is the idea that if enough people create a mythology of eternal life, rituals, memes, stories, they can literally manifest it into reality. In these circles, immortality isn't waiting in a lab, it's waiting in culture. People experiment with writing, occult practice, and digital spaces to seed a future where death is obsolete. It's weird, I don't really understand it, but that's my best explanation. Quantum immortality. Quantum immortality is a thought experiment from the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. The idea goes like this. Every time that there's a chance you could die, there are universes where you do and universes where you don't. Your conscious experience always continues in the branch where you survive, even if the odds get astronomically low. From your own point of view, you never experience death. You just keep waking up in increasingly improbable survival scenarios. It's not a proven theory, just a strange implication of taking many worlds seriously. Physicists don't endorse it as a real personal immortality plan, but online, people treat it as a kind of physics-backed afterlife. You can't ever experience being dead, so subjectively you're immortal. It's one of the few immortality ideas that doesn't require tech, rituals, or gods, just the universe splitting and your consciousness sticking to the unbroken path forever. Golden body. The golden body is a concept in some branches of Taoist alchemy and certain esoteric schools. It refers to a perfected physical form achieved through years of internal practice, meditation, breathwork, sexual energy control, and specific diets. In these teachings, the practitioner refines their body and spirit until they produce an immortal, radiant, golden body that can survive independently of the mortal flesh. It's described in texts as luminous, incorruptible, and able to travel realms. 2045 Initiative. The 2045 Initiative was launched by Russian billionaire Dmitry Iskov in 2011. Its stated goal was to achieve cybernetic immortality by 2045. The project laid out a roadmap of 4 stages: human-like robots controlled by the brain, then transferring consciousness into a computer, then uploading that consciousness into a non-biological avatar. It had flashy conferences with scientists and spiritual leaders. Over time, the project was less visible and more criticized, but for a while it was a public big money attempt to give an actual date for the end of death. Omega Point. The Omega Point is a theory by French Jesuit priest and scientist Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. In his view, the universe is evolving toward a final state of maximum complexity and consciousness, where all individual minds unite into one collective. This state would transcend time and space and could be considered eternal. Teilhard framed it in Christian language, a cosmic Christ drawing everything back into himself, but it's also been adopted in secular futurist circles as a kind of ultimate singularity. In this framework, immortality isn't an individual trick, but the end point of evolution itself. All consciousness converges into an infinite field where nothing is lost. Modern thinkers like Frank Tipler reinterpreted it in physics terms, arguing that advanced civilizations could manipulate the universe to achieve the Omega Point at the end of time. And that's the end of the iceberg, guys. Thank you for watching so far. I appreciate it. I love all of you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you want to see next, and have a great night, everyone. Sweet dreams.